Hello, welcome back to Shakespeare and Film. This week's sponsor is both Queen Elizabeth I and Queen Elizabeth II. I'm so happy. It's not often that they get to be in one frame at the same time, but thanks to the creativity of people who love to have fun with Photoshop, they are together at last. So you might have recalled that last week, Queen Elizabeth II gave what I found to be a very moving speech to the general public, the British people, reminding them to be strong, to be resilient in very difficult times. The reason it means so much coming from her is that she's like a battle axe, you know? She went through the Blitzkrieg. She's been through every major event of the 20th century. It's also funny because she was wearing a bright green, sort of Kelly green dress for that address. And so, of course, people who love green screens had a lot of fun sort of putting other kinds of images on her dress. So I found that wonderful because, A, her speech was very moving to me, especially considering that her own son had the COVID-19 virus. And that she felt compelled to still talk to us. And then, of course, the other reason is because I love Queen Elizabeth I. They are tough broads. So this video this week is brought to you by Tough Broads. All right, so we have a lot to do, so I'm going to get right into it. Once again, we're going to try a writing exercise together. We're going to have a discussion of Shakespeare's Macbeth based on your Moodle responses, which were absolutely some of the best of the semester. Each week I see a little bit of improvement in your, not just your writing style, but something that is difficult to acquire, which is an authoritative tone. I'm noticing that each week you have a little more confidence, a little more sense of your authority, a little more sense of the singularity of your voice. So I enjoy seeing that at this time of the semester because that's something that takes practice and takes time. And that's why we do the Moodle responses. And then I'll provide you with a brief introduction to Orson Welles' film version of Macbeth from 1948. So without further ado, let's get to work. Here's why we're doing the writing assignment that we're doing today. In the past week, I've spoken with or corresponded with enough students to start to get the sense that some of you are in trouble. And by that, I just mean it's been a month of this quarantine or this stay-at-home order. You've been away from your classes for a long time now, and some of you are still at Illinois Wesleyan because you cannot go home. And it's a very, very stressful situation. And I'm getting the distinct impression that it is really starting to wear on you all. And so what I want you to start to think about for this writing exercise is how much control you do have over your perception of things. One way to achieve that control is through exercises that have to do with mindfulness and meditation. So the exercise we'll do today is completely stolen from meditative acts that I've done in other contexts. Sometimes when you feel trapped, you just take inventory of what is in front of you, what is available to you, right? So that's what this exercise does. It's very, very powerful. I'm going to move my head up a little bit here. So today's writing prompt, for 5 minutes, just look at your space right now, just wherever you are. You might be at a desk, you might be at a kitchen table, you might be in an armchair, you might be on the front porch. Write about everything you can see, hear, smell, and touch in that space. Everything. The windows, the radiator against the wall, the toys in the toy bin, the medals that you won in cross country, the chalkboard that you use at some point, Tupperware containers, a tiny table that's still in your bedroom from when you were a kid. I don't know. I'm just literally looking at some of what's in this room to describe this to you. No detail is too small. Markers, posters, remote controls, extension cords, trophies, potpourri, a craft you made at camp in 5th grade, write it all down. What I'm going to do, again, you don't have to comment on it. You don't have to have an opinion on it. You don't have to state any emotion about it. All you have to do is write down a list. It could be phrases. It doesn't even have to be sentences. It's very quick, all right? So, without further ado, I'm going to get my notebook. I'm going to find a writing utensil. Yeah, I've got a pen. Oh, here's a pen. I got a pen. I got my notebook, and I got my timer, and I'm setting it for 5 minutes. Just go. Ready? Begin. Ooh, time's up. That went by very quickly for me. I don't know about you, but the reason I love that exercise is it's the simplest thing in the world. It's just a list, right? But it's very compelling to me because as soon as I start looking at all the things in the room, I think about their provenance, right? Where they came from, where we purchased them, why we purchased them, what kind of value or meaning or associations they had with them. I mean, I'm like, as you know, I'm in my kids' playroom. I found this little baby Jack thing from a McDonald's from, I don't know, a couple summers ago. And then I started thinking about how entertaining the film was. And then I started thinking about going to the movies in the summertime. I don't know. Your mind it's very associative, all of those leaps. And I find that to be actually a very relaxing activity because it takes me outside of myself a little and helps me remember a lot of things. So I hope that you had a similar experience. So let's get to the work at hand. Let's shift to your responses to Shakespeare's play, Macbeth, which were excellent. I really liked them. Quite a few of you. Let's see if I can try to organize this. What I noticed overall was quite a few of you were very, very drawn to Lady Macbeth. And just her dynamism, her sense of purpose, the ways in which she is the motivating factor. I mean, certainly the three weird sisters are a motivating, a catalyzing thing in the play, but it's Lady Macbeth that really spurs Macbeth to commit that first murder. And once he's on that road, then there's no turning back, right? So I really was intrigued by your responses to Lady Macbeth. And the two kind of concerns I have with Lady Macbeth are first of all, the ways in which she foregrounds the concerns about theatricality and acting in the play, but also how there seems to be a kind of wound at the center of Lady Macbeth, a kind of deep source of this ambition, but also aggression inside her. And I'd like for us to contemplate some possible reasons for what it is that motivates her, right? So, let's see. Let's start with Jess. Jess Norris, you had some very nice responses to Lady Macbeth. You wrote, "Is Lady Macbeth clinically insane? What are her motives? Why does she push Macbeth to do these horrible things?" This is the central question of the play, Jess. That's really, really good. You seemed very interested in the three prophecies at the end of the play. As we know, there's a huge plot twist that Jess was really interested in. Of the three prophecies, Jess, you seemed most concerned about the one in which the weird sisters say that the person that will kill you will be of no woman born, and how in the play Macbeth perceives that to mean that he's unbeatable. He's going to live forever. It creates in him this sense of hubris and arrogance that, well, every man in the Renaissance was of woman born. There was no other way to be born. So surely that means that no man can kill him. Of course, that's not what it means. And then we find out that Macduff was born as a result of like a C-section surgery. He was excised from his mother's body. There might have been a couple of ways in which that could have happened. It's possible that his mother died in childbirth, and so that he could not be delivered vaginally. He had to be delivered with a C-section. So he was not born in the traditional vaginal way. He's born of a C-section, and so that's how the weird sisters trick Macbeth, right? But let's just think about that for a minute. How is it that Macduff is not a woman born, and why would that matter for the play, right? Like, why would that be a plot point in the play? As you say, Jess, it's a terrific plot twist. Of course, it's surprising for us as audience members. It's almost like a riddle that you have to figure out. But I'd like to argue that there's something more going on there. I think it actually relates to something going on with Lady Macbeth. And here's what I mean by that, all right? So let's take a step back and think about all the ways in which Lady Macbeth is Macbeth's backup, his spine, his confidant, his mentor, his fellow schemer. Aditi, you had some beautiful commentary on Lady Macbeth. I could tell you really enjoyed seeing her evolve in this play. Aditi, you observed so well, quote, she is the brains behind the entire operation. Isn't that true? Without Lady Macbeth, Macbeth couldn't have reached the heights he reached. She's the one who got him to the throne. And I think that's true. Aditi also calls attention to something else, how often Lady Macbeth is acting and how often she's coaching Macbeth on how to act. That's important. So, Kaylee, you bring this up as well. I'm just going to quote from Kaylee's Moodle response. Quote, Lady Macbeth is truly an actress who can come up with the perfect facade to cover up her motives until she's broken and then asserts her tragedies in her sleep. Yes, absolutely. It's very, very good that you notice that. Let's look at the first big moment where there's this focus on acting. That's in Act 1, Scene 5, okay? And so this is the moment before the murders have occurred. This is the moment after Macbeth has shown his valor in battle, after he's received the prophecies from the Weird Sisters, after he's started to plot and connive with Lady Macbeth. And now he's going to be the host of this grand dinner in which King Duncan and his train are going to come to Macbeth's house, and now he's planning the murder. The problem is, it's supposed to be like a Martha Stewart dinner. You know what I mean? It's supposed to be celebratory. Everything's supposed to have gold leaf on it. Everything's supposed to be artsy and crafty with a Michelin-rated meal. You know what I'm saying? So it's supposed to be this beautiful, elegant state event. And Macbeth looks like he's seen a ghost. You know, he has had an encounter with the supernatural, and basically Lady Macbeth is giving him a bitch slap. She's like, wake up and act the part of the host, okay? She says, your face, my thane, my lord, your face, my thane, is as a book where men may read strange matters. To beguile the time, look like the time. Bear welcome in your eye, your hand, your tongue. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. He that's coming must be provided for. Fantastic advice. This is such great, memorable, memorizable, commonplace wisdom. This is one of thousands of episodes like this where Shakespeare does this in his plays. But look at that. To beguile the time, look like the time. So to deceive everyone, look like you are acting in a way that is appropriate to the occasion. Be welcoming with your face, your hand, your speech. Look innocent, but be the serpent that's underneath the innocence. Oh my God. She's just got the language right there. She's like, act the part so that you can do the thing that you claim you want to do so badly. That's really nice. Then if you jump ahead a little bit to the, this is at the very famous banquet scene. So we're jumping way ahead to Act 4, Scene 4. By this point, the killing has begun. Macbeth has killed King Duncan. He's killed his best friend Banquo. And now he sees the ghost of Banquo at the banquet table. This is terrifying, right? So Macbeth has gotten what he wanted. He is king. Lady Macbeth is queen. But he's not sleeping. He's incredibly restless. He has a guilty conscience. He can't believe what he's done, but he can't seem to stop it either. And he seems to be the only one who can see Banquo's ghost at the table. And he's looking like crazy, right? And he's terrifying his dinner guests. And Lady Macbeth says, oh, proper stuff. This is the very painting of your fear. This is the air-drawn dagger which you said led you to Duncan. Oh, these flaws and starts. Imposters to true fear would well become a woman's story at a winter's fire, authorized by her granddame. Shame itself. Why do you make such faces? When all's done, you look but on a stool. She, again, another bitch slap. She's saying, snap out of it. You're looking at an empty stool. No one's there. This is another one of your fantasies, just like when you said, is this a dagger I see before me? No, you didn't see a dagger. You were having a little fantasy. You're doing it again. Wake up, right? To beguile the time, look like the time, and be a good dinner host, right? So that's really interesting to me. And you said this, Kaylee. I loved your Moodle response. If anyone is not sure how to do a Moodle response, just do what Kaylee's doing. Very, very nice work the past few weeks. Kaylee says, Lady Macbeth becomes the perfect actress, which aids them in not being suspected of Duncan's death. A scene I would like to focus on, Typically, readers focus on Macbeth and the ghost in the scene and their various interactions, if the ghost is truly present or not, Macbeth's conscience, etc. However, I would like to focus on what an outstanding job Lady Macbeth does at covering up the situation and attempting to remedy Macbeth's wildness. Lady Macbeth comes up with many impromptu statements and stories to cover up for Macbeth's words. She claims it's something that occurs often and that they should pay it no mind. Macbeth jumps onto this and later claims, I have a strange infirmity which is nothing to those who know me. This is an easy cover-up for the situation that was beautifully and quickly made up by Lady Macbeth. Most present at this gathering do not know Macbeth well, so they would be unable to refute his claim. She even goes as far as to stop viewers' questions by saying, questions enrage him. Don't ask any more questions. It's genius. Shakespeare here is really allowing Lady Macbeth to be the director of the play in a way. She's the one who's doing the acting, but also teaching Macbeth how to act properly so that they can pull this off. Of course, they can't pull it off because both of them have a guilty conscience, and it ultimately destroys them both. So these are really, really powerful, interesting moments. And so that's part of my interest in this play, is the ways in which characters are calling attention to their acting, to making it up as they go in order to pull off the murders, right? There's another side of that acting, though, and that has to do with gender, and I'd like to focus on that for just a moment. Aditi, you called attention to, we're going to go back to Act 1, Scene 5 for a moment, and this is the moment where Lady Macbeth has read Macbeth's letter to her. She realizes that they're finally going to have a chance to have their dreams come true and become members of the royalty. Lady Macbeth, very early on in the play, says, come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Oh! Such good lines. I love them so much. So, so let's just think of for a minute about the actor who would read such lines. The actor is playing the role of Macbeth. In the 21st century, we have a tendency to think of Lady Macbeth as a woman, and she is. She's a woman character, and she's certainly one of Shakespeare's strongest female characters. But let's keep in mind that when this play was first performed in the early 1600s, it would have been a young boy actor playing the role of Lady Macbeth, a young boy actor whose voice had not yet changed, right? And this young boy, who's maybe 11 or 12 years old, is saying, come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. The assumption in these lines is a very gendered assumption that somehow a cisgendered woman would not be capable of direst cruelty, and that a woman would have to be unsexed to be capable of murdering someone or motivating someone to murder someone. And then there's jump ahead a couple of scenes to Act 1, Scene 7. And things get interesting here. Again, remember this is an 11 or 12-year-old boy playing the role of full-grown adult woman, Lady Macbeth. And she is chiding Macbeth for his ambivalence on whether he should kill the king. And she says to him the following: I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple out from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this. Wow! Okay, there's so much we could say here. But let's think for a minute. And Aditi, you've done this more than once in class where you've noticed a line or you've noticed a moment where something is missing in these plays and you ask a pivotal question. My question here is, why does Lady Macbeth bring up this baby that she's nursed? She says to us, I have given suck and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. Okay, so she's nursed a child. She seems to be of noble stock, so we can't assume that she is a governess or nurse, I don't think. Does this suggest that perhaps she has given birth to a baby? If she has, where is the baby? There's no mention of her and Macbeth having children. Does that mean she lost the baby? And if she lost the baby, how, if at all, might that inform our understanding of her motives and her complete lack of interest in breaking the familial line of King Duncan and his descendants, right? I just want to plant that seed there. Is that, you might hear me say that, and you might be thinking, no, there's no evidence for that in the play. But again, why is Shakespeare putting these lines in there? He's putting them in there to suggest how angry she is as she chides Macbeth and how willing she is to kill, right? But there could be a source of deep sadness here that might have turned into raw ambition and thirst for power, if you get my meaning. It's very interesting for me. And then Macbeth is so wowed by her speech that he says, bring forth men children only, for thy undaunted mettle should compose nothing but males. Interesting. He's suggesting that she is so tough, that she's so raw in her thirst for power and her raw ambition, that she would only be capable of bringing males into the world. She could never give birth to females because she's not soft enough for that. It interests me that there's this sort of essentialist language about women and their softness and their sweetness and their incapability of being cruel. Meanwhile, Lady Macbeth goes right there every single time. It's very, very interesting. So I just want you to think about that as you watch the film version this week. Think about what is fundamentally feminine and or not feminine about Lady Macbeth, and what perhaps has she lost that fuels her desire for power. I'm going to stop there in our discussion of the play. And I'm going to just push forward to talk about Orson Welles' film version. And in order to do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about Orson Welles and a brief biography, a little bit of highlights of his life and his accomplishments. And then I'm going to introduce to you, remind you of several film terms that we've discussed over the semester. You'll see them in Maurice Hindle's book chapter for this week. And then I'll show you 4 new ones that you should be aware of, all right? So first of all, Orson Welles. Maybe some of you have heard of Orson Welles, and maybe you're well aware of all of his achievements. But in case you haven't, I just want to give you a little taste of the genius that he was. And I just want to thank Erin Bernison, who is a student worker for the English department, who gave me some of the notes that I'm reading to you today. So Orson Welles, he was born in 1915, died in 1985. He had an amazing career. He did more by the time he was 21 years old than most people do in their entire lifetimes. He was a writer, a director, an actor, a producer, and he was everything. Absolutely stunning talent. So what do we know about him? He was orphaned by his mother died when he was 8.5, 9 years old. His father died when he was 15, and he was kind of largely left on his own. He was admitted to Harvard University, and he almost went, but instead he decided to travel for a little while with his inheritance that he got from his parents. And so he traveled to Europe, and at the age of 15, he walked into a theater in Dublin, Ireland, and he said, I want to audition. I'm huge on Broadway. I want you to take note of my talents. I am older than I look. I'm 25. He wasn't 25, he was 15. And he did the audition, and the director who was holding the auditions was so impressed with Orson Welles and his hubris that he thought that he would have him be a part of the acting group. So he acted in Europe. He came back to the United States, acted on Broadway. He had his rise to fame was just meteoric, really was. He had all sorts of very, very interesting projects that are worth noting. Long before he created his 1948 film version of Macbeth, he created something that he called Voodoo Macbeth, which was a federal theater project in 1936. So the Federal Theater Project was a part of the WPA, the Works Progress Administration from the New Deal during the Great Depression. So those of you who know your history of the Great Depression might know that the Works Progress Administration funneled all kinds of money to writers, to directors, to producers to keep theater alive in the United States. The federal government knew that theater was crucial to the well-being of Americans. They knew that it was a vital cultural resource. And so with that money, Orson Welles decided to create an all-African-American Macbeth. And instead of setting the play in Scotland, he set it in Haiti. And this was a historically significant production. It was, up until that point, one of the largest all-black casts for any Shakespeare play, or really any play. It was a huge splash. This is a kind of I'm sorry, it's a low-res photo. It was the best I could do. This was when Macbeth opened in Harlem in 1936. Very well attended, very well received. It was a very, very exciting moment in the history of theater, and Orson Welles was at the front of that. He was a very progressive individual. He was also very famous. A couple years later, he had a radio broadcast in which he read H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds, with his wonderful baritone voice, as he read this story about an alien invasion with aliens landing in New Jersey. He actually caused quite a stir because people in New Jersey actually believed that aliens had landed, and there was some hysteria surrounding this radio program because he had this amazing, compelling acting style and voice. Very interesting. He was someone who founded, one of several people who founded the Mercury Theater in the 1930s. He staged several Shakespeare plays and other kinds of plays as well. Very, very popular and well received. He was the force behind Citizen Kane, which he made in 1941. Certainly one of the most important films of all time for all of the magnificent film techniques that he used. It's often on film critics' list of the greatest films of all time. If you haven't seen the film, I highly recommend it. And of course, he creates Macbeth in 1948, and this is a film still from that film. So let's review some film terms that you already know, and in doing so, it'll allow us to go through some of the films that we've discussed over the semester. Orson Welles' Macbeth, 1948, the same year that Laurence Olivier created his Hamlet. And there's going to be a lot of similarities between the two of them, but some differences as well. But here are some of the similarities. This is when you watch Orson Welles' Macbeth, it will remind you of our discussion of film noir, right? And as you might recall, film noir is just French for dark film. You know that film noir was a genre in which directors were exploring the horror of crimes. There was a focus on the interiority of the character. There's the possibility of mental instability, cultural instability. We talked about ooh, yeah. Oh, give me a second here. Yeah, we talked about chiaroscuro, which is an Italian term, which is light and dark, right? So this very sharp contrast between darkness and lightness in order to create dramatic psychological effects. You're going to see a lot of that. You saw it in Austin Nielsen's Hamlet. That's the legacy of German Expressionism. You saw it in Laurence Olivier's Hamlet. You're going to see it again with Macbeth. Oh, yeah, we talked about dissolves. You might remember this many weeks ago when we talked about the 1936 Midsummer Night's Dream. I couldn't quite, I don't have my DVD with me. It's at my office. But you might recall that we talked about dissolve technology, and Orson Welles uses it quite a bit in his 1948 Macbeth, and that's the technology where you see a transformation on the screen. You might recall when Bottom, who's played by James Cagney, he transforms from Bottom the Weaver into an ass, and you see this dissolve from a human head into the head of a donkey, right? You'll see that kind of dissolve technique quite a bit in this week's film. We've talked about close-ups many, many times. Close-ups are the most basic way in which film distinguishes itself from theater performance, right? It's a beautiful example of how coercive the camera lens is and how it can guide us to a person's face and get us really close to that expressiveness. It's one of my favorite frames of the whole semester, as you know. John Leguizamo as Tybalt, a really nice close-up of him. We've also talked about reaction shots, which are often a subset of close-ups. Pay attention to reaction shots in Orson Welles' play. So here's a reaction shot from Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, right? This is a wonderful Queen Mab speech, right? Remember when Mercutio is talking about Queen Mab and he gets all worked up, and his gang is kind of watching him wax poetic about Queen Mab there. It's really nice. We talked about voiceover. Mise en scène, excuse me. Mise en scène, it's such a basic and important element of all film. I chose this film still from Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, of course, because here we have Lord Capulet talking to Paris, and you can see some of his writing implements, some of his books that he's working with, some of his tools for astronomy, maybe a candle that he reads by, some of his drinks that he might be drinking over here. All of the elements in this scene indicate to us that he is a very well-to-do, noble person in Verona, right? So you might think about how everything in the frame, both actors and as well as the setting itself, create a certain mood. In Orson Welles' Macbeth, we talked about voiceover. This is an element you're going to see in Macbeth. You saw it in Hamlet a couple of weeks ago, where the monologue gets internalized as a voiceover in the actor's head. It's meant to be very sort of psychological, gets you into the inner voice of the character, right? So zooms, a lot of zoom work in Orson Welles' Macbeth. I don't have the zoom here. Again, I couldn't quite get it online, and my DVD is not with me right now. But you might recall the first decent shot that we get of Olivia Hussey as Juliet. It's a zoom that goes from a distance straight up to her face, and it really gives her a sense of her youthful vigor, her innocence, her beauty. Keep track of the zooms that you see in Macbeth. And I want to provide you with 4 new terms. Maybe you know these terms. They're fairly basic. Maybe you don't, but if you know them, it's review. If you don't know them, keep track of them so that when you watch the film, you can get a sense of how they function. So backlighting, it's very simple. It's something that occurs in photography as well as in film. It's when an actor is thrown into shadow by being lit from behind. So essentially, this is when you see an actor's silhouette, but you can't see their face. And that can create a very dramatic effect. And you're going to see that whenever we have an encounter with the weird sisters in Orson Welles' Macbeth, they're always backlit. So if you look here, you can see that the source of the light is behind them, and we're getting a silhouette of them. Even though they're in a distance, it's a bit of a long shot, you can't see their faces, you can't just see their distinguishing characteristics. And again, this is another shot from later in the film. They've got these staffs that have sort of look like Ys. You see their hair, you see their gowns or robes, but you can't see their faces, which of course is terrifying. Another term to consider is POV, or point of view. If you write fiction or creative nonfiction, this is a phrase that should be near and dear to you. You know that perspective is everything. So in fiction, it's whoever is speaking, whoever's point of view or perspective we're getting the most of, right? In film, it's those moments when the camera seems to represent the point of view or perspective of a particular character over another. So this is another beautiful example of where film differentiates itself from theater. We can't do that in theater, but we can do it in film, right? So what I want you to pay attention to, and Maurice Hindle, he reiterates this in his book chapter, so you'll hear it again. But in that famous banquet scene, notice how first we get the perspective of Macbeth looking at the ghost of Banquo, right? And then it flips, and you can almost imagine that you're seeing the ghost of Banquo's point of view looking back at Macbeth. It's very cool. It's very spooky, very strange. But just keep track of that. Keep track of what the camera's doing. You're all sophisticated viewers by this point, and I'd love to hear you describe how you see the camera working in this film. Another term I'd like you to keep track of is montage, another French term. So much of our film terminology comes from the French because the French were real innovators in film in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So in a montage, meanings are built up or information is provided over a succession of shots. It's a good way to tell a story quickly or to accelerate the feel of the action in some way. So this is a great example of how film can manipulate time. Yeah, it can give you multiple perspectives on something that is happening in real time. It can build up the momentum and excitement through multiple perspectives. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to show you a training montage from a very famous film. It's the first Rocky movie, Rocky 1 from 1976. If you hear me say that and you say, oh, that movie's old, I haven't seen it, I don't care, you should care. I mean, we didn't look at Rocky in this class, and we didn't look at the first 2 Godfather movies, but God help you if you haven't seen these films. Like, just, if you have time on your hands, get the films and watch these magnificent films. They're some of my favorite movies of all time. Let me just show you briefly a little bit of the Rocky montage, if I may. And as soon as you see it, you're going to know what it is, okay? Very, very, very famous. We'll just watch it for a little while, okay? stop it there. I could just watch this all day. I don't even like boxing, but I love this. I have seen this movie so many times, and every time I love it. The reason that montage is so great in the history of film is because it's got everything in it. Sylvester Stallone directed this film, as you might know. He received an Oscar for it. What do you get from this montage? You get how hard his fitness regime is, obviously, as he's training to fight Apollo Creed. But you get a sense of the landscape of Philadelphia, and surely, even if you haven't seen this film, maybe you've seen this very, very famous so good. Great music by Bill Conti. Sylvester Stallone makes such beautiful use of the landscape of Philadelphia. He showed you the water. When he was on those steps just now, he was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. He showed the character, Rocky Balboa, when he's running through the streets of a lower-income neighborhood. You're seeing that he's a man of the people, and he's throwing a ball back at them and this and that. 1977. It was the bicentennial, so for the film to take place in Philadelphia was so meaningful and symbolic. Oh my God, I love this movie. And if you've seen Creed, which is a more recent film in which Sylvester Stallone is training the Creed's son, Michael B. Jordan, or maybe grandson? Son, I don't know. Anyway, it has a similar type of workout montage, right? By now it's a staple of these kinds of movies. There's a montage scene in Macbeth as well. So I'm just going on and on. But let me just see if I can find it quickly. And this is the scene where King Duncan has been murdered, and all of a sudden everybody's going crazy trying to figure out what happened, and it's chaos at the castle, right? And I think Maurice Hindle observes that there's like 45 cuts in like this, just a few minutes of film. So the cuts are meant to be really fast and chaotic, and give you a sense of just how disordered things are, right? So look at this just for a moment.
Cannot conceive of need. Confusion now hath made his masterpiece. Most sacrilegious murder broke up the Lord's anointed temple and stole thence a life ability.
Okay, I'm going to stop there. It goes on for a little while longer, but you can just get a sense of, again, use of shadows, use of contrast against light and dark. There's a lot of elements there, but the fast pace of the montage, I'd like you to think about that. There's one final film term I'd like to share with you, and that is a wipe. A wipe. So the most famous example of a wipe, and let me see if I can get back to my little thing here. A wipe is a form of transition from one shot to another in which a margin moves across the screen to eliminate the first shot and reveal the second. There's a very famous wipe of sorts in Macbeth, and it's at the banquet scene. But to give you a sense visually of what a wipe looks like, I will show it to you here. Yeah, I love YouTube. Oh man, this is every wipe transition in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Another one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm crazy about this movie. So watch this. This is a... Here we go. Yep. You go this way. There you go. Those are wipes. Okay, I'm going to stop there. You've seen this technology before. I'm sure you've been aware of it, even if you weren't sure of the name of it. And so I mentioned that to you because at the banquet scene, this is a low-tech film, this 1948 Macbeth that you're going to see. Orson Welles shot it in 23 days. He had very limited resources. He's lucky he finished it at all. He had big ambitions for it, but he made do with what he had. Let me see if I can find this shot. 5618. You know me with the thing. 5618. So this is at the banquet scene, and this is just a wipe with his hand. But it's very psychological because what he does with his hand is it's sort of like a before and an after, where before he wipes with his hand, you have a sense that he has some modicum of sanity. And then after his hand goes down, that's when things really change for Macbeth.
You know your own degrees. Sit down. And first and last, a hearty welcome. Here, as we know, our country's honor roofed, where the great person of our Banquo present. His absence, sir, lays blame upon his promise.
My royal lord, you do not give the cheer.
Sweet remembrance, sir. I drink to our good friend Banquo, whom we miss. Would he were here.
All right, now watch what happens with this. He uses his hand for the wipe effect. Nice. Oh, yeah. Well done, Orson. Oh, yeah. That's fantastic. That's a low-tech wipe right there. Fantastic. There's so many nice things he does in this banquet scene. I look forward to seeing how you will read it, respond to it, etc. That's all I got for you for this week. Oh, a few questions for you that might help you narrow your focus a little, okay? And, of course, your homework, okay? Number one, what is the effect of some deletions of Shakespeare's key scenes in Orson Welles' film? So there's a lot, and I'm annoyed by it. I hate this. I don't like when film directors cut political elements of Shakespeare's plays. It bothers me because the political elements are as thrilling to me as the individual elements. So yes, Macbeth's story of bloodthirsty ambition is compelling, but it's only compelling to me against the backdrop of his military valor and Malcolm ascending the throne. But that's just me. So for you, what is the effect of some deletions of Shakespeare's key scenes? For example, the captain's report from the battlefield at the beginning of the play, or Malcolm's final words when he becomes king. So that's one possible way you could go with your Moodle response. Key questions. Number two, which film technique is most arresting to you as a viewer? Choose one scene and address how a particular technique is used. Again, I just gave you both a review of old terms as well as 4 new terms that you could play with and have some fun with. Number 3, what do you make of Orson Welles' acting style? What insight does he provide about Macbeth's character? And if you'd prefer to talk about Lady Macbeth, you can. If you prefer to talk about Malcolm or the weird sister, anything you want, really. I'm just giving you some suggested ways to focus your attention. Yeah. So here's your homework. You know that our syllabus is on Moodle. You know all this is available. No surprises. Read Maurice Hindle's book chapter on Macbeth, which is available on Moodle. Watch Orson Welles' 1948 Macbeth, which is available on YouTube. I provide the YouTube clip on Moodle as well. Post your Moodle response by this Sunday at midnight. If you can do it earlier, that would be an enormous help to me. Please aim for Saturday if you could. And send a JPEG of your writing activity to me via email. That's sort of like your participation grade. That's my way of knowing that you watched the video. And that's it. So thank you. Please stay hopeful. Please stay positive. Please stay safe. Take care of your families. Be good to each other. And I will see you next week. Okay, that is all for me. Over and out. Bye-bye.